Marcus Aurelius wrote that the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. Picture living in a world that constantly tells you how you should feel, think, and behave, and imagine having the ability to stay peaceful and content, no matter what's happening around you. That's not just powerful, that's genuinely revolutionary. It's not about controlling the world. It's about mastering something far more important, and something that's genuinely within. Reach your own mind.
Stoic philosophy teaches resilience, gratitude,
And the skill of living a fulfilled life. But this isn't merely a history lesson. It's about you and your life today. It's about facing the noise of the modern world without losing your composure. It's about finding stillness inside the storm and happiness in the smallest things. It's about transforming your mornings from something you dread into a powerful launchpad for a day full of purpose and joy. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by life's noise, if you've ever struggled to find a moment of quiet, or if you're simply curious how ancient wisdom can become your secret weapon in the modern world, stay with me. This could be the video that changes everything for you. Let's get into the Stoic strategies that can help us build not just a morning routine, but a life full of intention, resilience, and true happiness. I'm asking you to give this video your complete attention from beginning to end. If you've made it this far, you're not like most people. You're someone who seeks depth and wisdom. Your willingness to absorb this fully sets you apart even more. This idea might sound fancy, but it's actually a beautifully simple concept from Japan. It's about discovering that sweet spot where your passions, your skills, what the world needs, and what you can be compensated for all overlap. It's your personal reason for existing. Imagine waking up each morning driven by a purpose so clear it makes hitting snooze feel irrelevant. Marcus Aurelius wasn't only about enduring hardship with a stiff upper lip. He genuinely believed we're all here to play a part, to contribute something meaningful. He encouraged approaching each day as a chance to fulfill that role with integrity and passion. Now think about that. Alongside this concept, it's not just about finding what you love, it's about aligning it with what the world needs and what you're naturally good at. That's where the real magic happens. But how do you start uncovering this? It begins with honest self-reflection. Ask yourself, what am I passionate about? What am I good at? What does the world need from me? What can I be paid for? It's fine if the answers don't come right away. This is a journey exploring different parts of your life and seeing where they intersect. This search for purpose isn't some shallow feel-good exercise. It's about laying the foundation for a life rich in meaning and satisfaction. When your daily actions align with a deeper purpose, even ordinary tasks gain significance. Your relationships flourish because you're more present. Your creativity grows because you're connected to your true passions. And happiness becomes a steady companion rather than a fleeting visitor. So as you think about setting tomorrow's alarm, consider what this purpose looks like for you. What could be compelling enough to make you leap out of bed? Remember, this isn't about instant transformation. It's a gradual process. And as Marcus Aurelius would remind us, it comes from doing the work daily with dedication and honor. Discovering your purpose isn't just personal fulfillment. It's about embracing your role in the larger story of humanity, contributing your own unique thread. The ancient Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius, strongly believed our actions should be purposeful, not random, but deliberate steps guided by our inner compass. This philosophy extends beautifully into how we prepare for the day, starting the night before. Here's truth. The quality of your morning begins with how you spend your evening. It's tempting to binge watch shows late into the night or scroll through social media until your eyes blur. But let's pause and think about what that sets you up for the next day. Your brain needs time to unwind, process the day's events, and recharge for what's ahead. That's where a solid evening routine matters. Imagine treating your evening with the same care and intention as any other important part of your life. This isn't about rigid discipline that drains the joy from your nights. It's about creating space that supports your well-being and prepares you for tomorrow. For instance, cutting screen time an hour before bed isn't about denying yourself relaxation. It's about signaling to your mind that it's time to slow down. making it easier to fall asleep and wake up feeling refreshed.
Planning a little for the
next day can also make a real difference. Something as simple as writing your top 3 priorities sets a clear direction and ensures you wake up with a sense of purpose. Here's where the Stoic mindset truly matters. It's about recognizing what's within our control and releasing what isn't. We can't control every detail of our day, but we can influence how we begin it. And let's not forget deep breathing or meditati on to settle the mind. This isn't just fluff. It's a genuinely powerful practice that signals to your body it's time to rest. Breathing slowly in and out helps lower stress, slow your heart rate, and prepare your body for deep restorative sleep. It's like hitting reset, ensuring you wake up refreshed, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too, in a world that never seems to switch off.
This might sound like an enormous task,
But it's genuinely essential for setting the tone of your entire day. Picture the first moments of your morning free from digital noise, no emails, no notifications, no buzzing news cycle. Just you, your thoughts, and the quiet stillness of dawn that's not just refreshing, it's empowering. Marcus Aurelius strongly advocated for living with intention and focus. He wasn't distracted by notifications in ancient Rome, and he certainly had his share of distractions.
Instead, he emphasized staying present.
And focused on the task at hand, he understood something even more relevant today. The quality of your attention determines the quality of your life. So how do we bring this ancient wisdom into modern life? First, it's about creating a morning space, intentionally free of digital distraction. This isn't about rejecting technology, but choosing not to let it dictate how your day begins. It's tempting to reach for your phone the moment you wake, but that instantly puts you into a reactive state, responding to everyone else's demands instead of a calm start. Imagine dedicating your first waking hour to things that nourish your mind and spirit. Maybe reading, meditating, journaling, or simply sipping coffee. While looking out the window, this isn't wasted time. It's an investment in your well-being. Avoiding distraction doesn't just reduce stress, it actively builds a reserve of calm and focus you'll draw on throughout the day. Making the most of your mornings isn't about adding more to your to-do list. It's about clearing away the noise that doesn't serve you. It's about prioritizing what truly matters before the day's demands pull your attention away. This is exactly where the Stoic practice of focusing on what's within your control comes in. You may not control the emails waiting for you, but you can control how and when you engage with them. So tomorrow, challenge yourself to start the day on your own terms. Resist the urge to dive into your phone first thing. Instead, anchor yourself in the present moment, savoring the calm and potential the morning holds. Remember, every day is a new chance to live more intentionally, more peacefully, and more aligned with who you want to become. Let's make our mornings reflect that ambition, guided by timeless Stoic wisdom and an unwavering focus on what truly matters at its core. Stoicism is about understanding what's within our control and acting with virtue and intention within that space. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus weren't just talking about enduring hardship with a stiff upper lip. They were advocating for active engagement with life, taking ownership of our actions. And our mindset, waking up consistently, is a practice that embodies this philosophy. It's a declaration that we're in control of how our day begins, not at the mercy of impulse or outside pressure. Building a life the Stoic way, step by step, with contentment in each action, is a powerful idea. It reminds us that big changes start with small, consistent actions. Waking at the same time each morning might seem minor, but it's a cornerstone habit that sets the stage for everything else. It creates a stable foundation for your day, where instead of rushing from the moment your eyes open, you start with a sense of control and purpose. But here's the reality: consistency is genuinely hard. It's supposed to be. In the early days of trying to wake at the same time each morning, your bed feels more comfortable than ever, and the urge to hit snooze one more time can feel irresistible. This is where the Stoic practice of perseverance comes in. It's about reminding yourself why you're doing this. the person you're becoming through this discipline. It's about looking past momentary comfort and focusing on the long-term value this habit brings, becoming someone who wakes early isn't just about mornings. It's about embodying qualities that make you resilient, focused, and intentional throughout your whole day. It's a practice in self-mastery, aligning your actions with your values and building the life you want one morning at a time. So how do we make consistency our ally? Start by setting a clear intention the night before. Remind yourself why waking at a specific time matters to you. Is it for quiet time to read or meditate, for exercise, or simply to start your day more relaxed? And in control, then build an environment that supports this habit, maybe going to bed a little earlier or keeping curtains slightly open so natural light wakes you gently. And when it gets difficult, remember the Stoic belief in the power of our own will and the importance of acting according to our principles. Every time you wake at your chosen time, you're not just starting your day. You're reinforcing a commitment to yourself, to your growth, and to a life of intention and purpose. Amid all this talk of discipline, consistency, and rising with the sun, it's important to remember one thing: we're human, and being human means we're beautifully complex creatures whose brains often prefer the path of least resistance. The instant gratification route.
This is exactly
Why new habits like transforming our mornings can initially feel like an uphill battle. Yet there's something freeing in accepting this fact. It's not a flaw, it's simply part of being human. Now let's bring some Stoic thinking into this. Stoicism teaches self-compassion and understanding alongside its calls for discipline and resilience. Marcus Aurelius, in his personal writings, often reminded himself to be patient and forgiving with his own shortcomings. He knew that punishing himself for every slip-up wasn't the path to growth. Instead, he encouraged recognizing errors, learning from them, and letting them go. This matters greatly when building new morning routines or any habit. Those first few days or weeks can be tough. Your alarm goes off and every part of you wants to stay wrapped in the warmth of your bed, and honestly, there will be days you give in to that pull. That's okay. The key is, what happens next? Do you spiral into guilt and self-criticism, or do you pause, forgive yourself, and treat the next morning as a fresh chance to try again? Self-forgiveness and patience aren't signs of weakness, they're signs of strength and wisdom. They mean you're in it for the long haul, ready to navigate the ups and downs with grace. This Stoic practice of self-compassion is about understanding your own nature, working with it, and gently guiding yourself toward the habits in life you're aiming for. Taking it easy on yourself isn't about making excuses or letting yourself constantly fall short. It's about recognizing that growth involves learning curves and setbacks. It's about understanding that every new day brings fresh challenges and opportunities, and it's in that daily renewal that we find our strength and resilience. So as you work on embracing early mornings or any new habit, be gentle with yourself, celebrate small wins, learn from setbacks, and greet each day ready to try again. This isn't just about becoming an early riser, it's about building a mindset ready to face life's challenges with both determination and kindness. Consider the simple act of placing your alarm across the room. It's not just about making it physically harder to snooze, it's a statement. A commitment to start the day on your own terms, to rise, despite the comfort of your bed. It's a small act of defiance against inertia and comfort, a step toward meeting the day with intention. Similarly, making your bed each morning might feel trivial, especially if no one else sees it, but it's far more than smoothing sheets. It's an act of care, telling yourself your environment matters. It's about shaping a space that reflects the order and self-respect you're cultivating within. These small victories, as Marcus Aurelius would likely argue, are the building blocks of a disciplined life. They're the everyday choices that easily overlooked cumulatively shape our character. Every time you follow through on these small things, you're voting for the kind of person you want to be, someone who values discipline, order, and self-respect. But why focus on these small acts? Because they're within everyone's reach. We can't control the major upheavals life throws at us, but we can control how we respond at the start of each day, how we treat our surroundings, and how we prepare for what lies ahead. This is Stoicism in action. focusing on what's within our power and letting go of what isn't. Beyond that, these practices aren't just about discipline for its own sake. They're about cultivating a mindset ready for life's bigger challenges. When you commit to these small acts, you train yourself to uphold bigger commitments too. You sharpen your ability to follow through, remain steady, wise through adversity, and approach life with calm, collected composure qualities that define the Stoic ideal. So as you consider discipline's role in your life, start small. Look for everyday chances to practice self-control and order. Remember, it's in these quiet moments, when you choose to rise and face the day with intention, that your character is forged. These practices aren't just chores, they're rituals that give your day purpose and your life direction and meaning. Here's a simple but powerful idea: sharing your goals with someone who supports you and also holds you accountable can significantly boost your chances of success. It turns a personal journey into a shared adventure, making your path to a fulfilling morning routine and, ultimately, your life's purpose less daunting and more enjoyable. Think of your accountability partner as your ally in self-improvement. They remind you of your commitments when your bed feels too comforting to leave. They encourage you when progress feels slow and celebrate your wins no matter how small. This relationship goes both ways, built on mutual support and the shared understanding that we're all striving to become better versions of ourselves. The Stoics, including Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, often emphasized community and relationships in developing character and virtue. They believed in shared wisdom, learning from each other, and finding strength in knowing you're not alone in your struggles. Finding an accountability partner today reflects that timeless wisdom, recognizing that while the journey toward discipline and purpose is personal, it doesn't have to be solitary. An accountability partner can also help you spot blind spots you might miss on your own, offering fresh perspectives that spark growth in unexpected ways. This partnership goes beyond checking whether you woke on time. It's about real conversation about what's working, what isn't, and how you can support each other through adjustments. So how do you find this person? Look for someone who shares your commitment to growth. This could be a friend, family member, or colleague. The key is choosing someone you trust, someone you can be open with about your goals, struggles, and wins. Once you've found them, be clear about what you're hoping to achieve and what support you need. Set regular check-ins and be there for each other with encouragement, advice, and, when needed, a gentle nudge back on track. Remember, this partnership is about more than external motivation. It's about building a relationship that lifts you both up, creating a shared space where honesty, vulnerability, and mutual support are valued. In that space, your morning routines and broader life goals become intertwined in a collective push toward living with more intention, discipline, and fulfillment. The Stoic practice of reflecting on mortality is a call to action, a prompt to live with purpose and intention. It encourages us not to waste time on trivialities, but to focus on building something meaningful. Every morning we wake, we're given a fresh chance to engage with life meaningfully, to contribute positively to the world, and to keep pursuing growth and fulfillment. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often wrote about how fleeting life is, emphasizing the importance of living virtuously and making the most of our time. This wasn't meant to feel heavy. It was a liberating realization that freed him from petty concerns and let him focus on his duties as emperor and as someone striving toward virtue. The idea is that keeping the end in mind helps us live with more purpose and clarity. Prioritizing what truly matters, remembering that our time is limited, transforms how we approach our mornings. It's not just another day. It's a day we've been given, one that's never guaranteed. This realization can deeply shape how we spend our time, the activities we choose, the relationships we nurture, and the legacy we build. It's a reminder to live fully, love deeply, and leave the world a little better than we found it. This Stoic practice also helps us keep perspective through life's inevitable setbacks. When we remember our time is limited, daily annoyances lose much of their grip. We become more resilient, more focused on long-term goals, and less easily derailed by temporary difficulties. It fosters gratitude for the present
and inspires us to make the most of it. So,
How do we bring this principle into daily life? It starts with a moment of reflection each morning. Consider the day ahead as a blank canvas, a chance to contribute positively to your story and to those around you.
ask yourself, if this were my last day, would I be proud of?
How I'm spending it. This doesn't mean living in constant existential worry, but cultivating deep appreciation for the now, for the chance to live, learn, and love in embracing this reflection on mortality. We're not fixating on the end, but on the present and how we choose to live each day. It's a powerful antidote to complacency and a reminder to live with intention, purpose, and gratitude. So let's greet each morning knowing it's a gift, a chance to build a life rich in meaning and aligned with our deepest values. This is the essence of living stoically, making the most of our limited time to create something lasting. We're often told to focus on the positive, to visualize success and happiness so we can attract them into our lives. But the Stoics, in their wisdom, offer a different perspective, one that's remarkably practical. And empowering negative visualization isn't about pessimism. It's a tool for resilience, preparation, and ultimately deeper appreciation of the present. The core of this practice is periodically imagining the challenges or losses you might face. This could range from small inconveniences like missing a bus to bigger hardships like losing a job or someone you love. The purpose isn't to dwell on these scenarios in a way that breeds fear, but to mentally rehearse how you'd cope should they arise. This process prepares you emotionally and mentally, making you less easily thrown off by life's inevitable ups and downs. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus all believed that by contemplating the temporary nature of everything outside our control, we could build deeper peace and resilience. This practice encourages us to focus on what we can control: our responses, our attitudes, our actions. Bringing negative visualization into your morning routine can transform how you approach your entire day. Instead of stepping out blind to potential challenges, you're mentally equipped to face. It's like a training session for your resilience muscles. So when life throws a curveball, you're not knocked off your feet. You've already rehearsed the moment and can draw on your pre-visualized strategies. Moreover, this practice has a beautiful, somewhat paradoxical effect. It deepens our gratitude for the present by imagining life without things we take for granted. We return to reality with renewed appreciation for them. It's a reminder of how much we already have to be thankful for. This isn't about dwelling in fear of loss, but using that thought to deepen appreciation for the here and now. So, how do we practice negative visualization in a healthy, constructive way? Start with a few moments each morning to consider potential challenges of the day or broader possibilities. Visualize how you'd ideally respond, what strengths you'd draw on, what you could learn, and how you could grow. Then release the visualization and move into your day carrying a sense of preparedness and heightened appreciation for your current circumstances. Bringing gratitude into our lives, especially as we end our day, can transform our well-being and outlook. Keeping a gratitude journal is a simple yet powerful way to cultivate appreciation.
It's about taking a few moments
before sleep to reflect and write down a few things you're grateful for. It could be anything: a kind gesture, a beautiful sunset, finishing a hard task, or the comfort of your bed. Waiting at the end of a long day, writing down what you're grateful for shifts your focus from what's lacking to the abundance already present. It's a practice that aligns perfectly with Stoic teaching, which emphasizes focusing on what we have rather than what we don't, on what's within our control rather than what isn't. This shift not only sets the stage for peaceful sleep free from unfulfilled desires or lingering frustration, it also primes your mind to begin the next day with purpose and appreciation. But why end the day with gratitude? Because it lets us close the day on a positive note. Regardless of the challenges faced, it reaffirms the good in our lives, finds peace even amid turmoil, and nurtures a mindset that sees opportunities for growth and joy in every circumstance. This nightly practice of gratitude creates a ripple effect, shaping not just how we sleep, but how we wake and approach mornings. It transforms our first thoughts from groaning at the alarm to quiet anticipation of what the new day holds, and what new things we might discover. To appreciate this practice also extends beyond our personal sphere. It enhances relationships as we become more attuned to the value of those around us, and more expressive of our appreciation for them. It deepens our connection to the world as we grow more observant of and thankful for the beauty around us, often in the most ordinary moments. So as we consider these strategies to enrich our mornings, and by extension, our lives, let's not overlook the power of ending our day with gratitude. It's a practice that embodies the Stoic pursuit of a good life, marked not by external achievement, but by inner peace, contentment, and deep appreciation for the present. As we wrap up this journey through 10 strategies inspired by Stoicism, it's clear each practice is more than a task. It's a pathway to a life of intention, resilience, and profound gratitude. Embracing these practices doesn't mean every day will be perfect, but every day will be met by a stronger, more grateful, more resilient version of you. You already have within you the power to transform not just your mornings, but your entire life into a reflection of the Stoic ideals of virtue, wisdom, and contentment. Remember, this is only the beginning. There's a whole world of Stoic wisdom waiting to be explored, ready to guide you toward a more meaningful and fulfilled life. If this resonated with you, check out our playlist right here on the screen, packed with insights, stories, and practical tips to help you embrace Stoic philosophy fully. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Let's continue this journey of growth, resilience, and fulfillment together. Here's to mornings filled with purpose, days lived with intention, and a life brimming with gratitude. Thank you for being part of the Stoic Journal community. See you soon. Imagine living a life where nothing, not someone's rudeness, not their lies, not even their disrespect, can shake your peace. Imagine moving through the chaos of the world with a calm so deep that people wonder if you know something they don't.
You still hear the insults. You still see the drama.
But it no longer enters your system. It touches you, but it doesn't move you. But let's be honest. How many times has one careless comment ruined your entire day? How many nights have you stared at the ceiling, replaying an argument, getting angry all over again? Even though the moment passed long ago, most people don't live in peace. They live in reaction. They don't own their emotions. Their emotions own them. One insult, one rejection, one unexpected look, and their whole energy shifts, not because the world holds that much power, but because they never learned how to reclaim it. Here's the truth. Stoicism taught this centuries ago, and neuroscience confirms it. Today you can become emotionally untouchable, not cold, not numb, but untouchable, like a mountain in a storm. The wind howls, the rain crashes, but the mountain doesn't move. That's the inner strength we're unlocking today. And once you have it, you'll never again be thrown off by what someone says. You'll never feel small because of someone else's mood. You'll never again be angered or bothered by anyone or anything. We're not just talking about staying calm, we're talking about complete emotional sovereignty, real Stoic power, the kind Marcus Aurelius wrote about, not to appear wise, but to survive the weight of an empire without losing his soul. So stay with me. What we're about to explore will reshape how you see people, how you handle triggers, and most importantly, how you master yourself, and if you appreciate what we're doing here. The clarity, the calm, the tools to live unshaken. There's one small favor to ask. Hit subscribe. It's free. It helps more than you know, and it's the kind of support that keeps this content flowing.
It's not them. It was never them.
First shift in perception you need to make if you want to stop being angered, triggered, or emotionally hijacked by others. You think it's how they spoke to you, the disrespect in their tone, the way they dismissed your effort, or rolled their eyes, but that's just the surface. What really stings is what those moments stir up inside you. Something deeper, something older, something you're not even fully aware exists. Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. And you'll call it fate. That's what happens every time we blame others for how we feel. We hand over the keys to our emotional state and then wonder why we keep being driven into chaos. But here's the truth. Nobody can make you feel anything without your participation. Anger, frustration, resentment aren't caused by other people. They're caused by your response to them. And that response is shaped by the unresolved parts of you you've been avoiding for years. Think about it. Two people can face the exact same insult. One shrugs it off, the other stews over it for days. The insult didn't change. The difference is what it touched inside. We're not reacting to what they said or did. We're reacting to what it stirs in us. Old wounds, expectations, unquestioned beliefs, and more often than not, it's not even about the moment. It's about everything that moment reminds us of. When someone ignores you and you feel invisible, that pain isn't born in that second. It's a repetition, a mirror. Maybe reflecting all the times you felt overlooked growing up when someone criticizes you, and you explode. That reaction didn't come from the words themselves. It came from a need to protect an identity you've worked hard to maintain. Maybe being seen as competent or good or strong is so central to how you see yourself that even the slightest crack feels like a collapse. That's the real battlefield, not the conversation, not coworker or partner or stranger online. It's what's happening inside you. Aristotle said that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, and self-knowledge isn't just knowing what you like or your goals. It's understanding the places in you that still hurt, that still seek approval, that still believe peace has to come from being treated a certain way. Here's where the breakthrough begins. You are not your reaction. You are not your anger. You are not your pain. You are the one watching those things. You are the awareness underneath it. All the more you connect to that awareness, the less you need the outside world to behave perfectly for you to feel okay. That doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It means your peace is no longer dependent on the presence or absence of it. That's a whole different level of freedom. Because most people aren't really living, they're just reacting. One text ruins their entire morning. One online comment derails their whole mindset. One bad look sends them spiraling into self-doubt. That's not living. That's surviving on emotional autopilot. But you can step off that ride, and it starts when you stop making others the villain in your story. The moment you stop saying they made me feel this way, and start saying something in me responded to that, everything changes. You back your power. You begin asking better questions. Not why are they like this, but why does this bother me so much? Not why are they so disrespectful, but what am I holding on to that makes me this reactive? That question, what am I holding on to, is where you'll find most of your answers. Plato once said, the first and best victory is to conquer self. And conquering yourself isn't about suppressing your emotions. It's about understanding where they come from and deciding whether they still serve you. It's about noticing when your pride wants to fight back, when your ego wants to be right, and choosing not to be led by that. This isn't passivity. It's power. The power to choose your response, to feel the rise of emotion and not let it drive your next move. That kind of control isn't something you're born with. It's something you train like a muscle, like discipline, like presence. The people who trigger you most are your greatest teachers, not because they're wise or kind, but because they show you exactly where you're still attached, still raw, where you've built an identity that depends on others treating you a certain way to feel valid. And when you use those moments as mirrors instead of battlefields, you grow. That's the difference between reacting and evolving. Socrates once said, let him who would move he world first move himself. And that movement doesn't start with changing your environment. It starts with watching yourself more clearly, becoming aware of the stories you tell when something doesn't go your way, the assumptions you make, the roles you play, the beliefs you hold without question. When you believe someone should treat you better and they don't, that gap between expectation and reality becomes suffering. But when you accept that people act based on who they are, not who you are, you stop tying your emotions to their behavior. You become unshakable. Because your peace is no longer reactive. It's rooted. You don't get offended as easily. You don't chase apologies. You don't need everyone to understand you or agree with you or like you. You know who you are, and that knowing becomes your anchor. Even when the storm hits, even when someone disrespects you, even when life feels unfair, because you've stopped trying to control things that were never yours to control. You've stopped outsourcing your peace to people who are just as lost and reactive as you once were. You've stopped depending on the world to reflect your worth back to you. That's what Stoicism has always been about. Epictetus taught that we should concern ourselves only with what's within our control. Our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs, everything else, what people say, what they do, how they treat us, is external. If you anchor your calm to the external, you'll never be steady. But if you learn to root it internally, nothing can move you. That's the invitation to move through life with grace. Not because life is gentle, but because you are grounded to face criticism, rejection, misunderstanding, and remain clear. Not numb, not shut down, but strong, centered, awake. The next time someone tries to provoke you, let it pass through. Don't deny the reaction, just don't identify with it. Watch it rise, watch it fall, let it be what it is, a ripple, not a wave. And if it still gets to you, if the sting lingers, if the thoughts return later, that's not failure, that's the doorway. That's where you walk through and say, here's where I still need to do the work. Because the goal isn't to become emotionless. The goal is to become emotionally free, not controlled by impulses, not ruled by pride, but aware, intentional, unbothered. Not because you avoid life, but because you face it so fully, it no longer scares you. And when you live from that place, people notice. They may not say it aloud, but they feel it. The steadiness, the calm, the energy that says, you can bring me chaos, but you won't pull me into it. That's not arrogance. That's mastery. And if you've made it, Keach is far. There's a reason some part of you knows it's time to stop giving your peace away to people who don't even realize what they're doing. Some part of you knows your calm is too precious to keep handing out in exchange for approval, validation, or control. You weren't born knowing how to react to rejection. You didn't arrive with a manual telling you to flare up when disrespected, to crumble when ignored, to defend your pride at all costs. When criticized, those reactions, the quick anger, the defensiveness, the need to prove something, were learned, passed down, absorbed like secondhand smoke. You didn't write the script. You just started playing the part. That's what makes this so powerful, to realize most of what you think is you. Your temperament, your triggers, how you react under pressure isn't actually you. It's conditioning, it's habit. It's a script that started writing itself long before you were even aware it was happening. Somewhere along the way, maybe someone taught you directly or indirectly that being ignored means you don't matter, that being challenged means you must fight, that being wrong means you're not enough. These beliefs run like hidden code quietly in the background of your life. And until you bring them into the light, they'll keep directing your reactions without your permission. Carl Jung said it best, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. That means every emotional outburst, every sudden shutdown, every time you overthink something someone said.
That's not fate. That's not your personality. That's programming.
And programming can be rewritten, but you can't change a script. You're not aware, you're acting out. So the work begins by becoming the observer, not the actor. You notice, you pause, you step back, just far enough to ask, what part of me is speaking right now? That question, asked sincerely, opens the door to everything. Because the moment you feel triggered, the moment something lights a fire in you, it's easy to believe that fire is justified. But strong emotion doesn't always mean truth. Often, it just means the script got activated. And when you keep playing out the same emotional loops with different people and situations, you start noticing something strange. The actors change, but the storyline stays the same. That's the giveaway. It's never really about them. It's about what they awaken. And most people never trace the fire back to the spark. They don't question the reaction. They just assume it's valid because it feels real. But intensity doesn't equal accuracy. Just because you feel something deeply doesn't mean its root. Ed in clarity, and when you start unpacking those reactions, what you often find underneath isn't strength, it's fear. Fear of being seen a certain way, fear of not being heard, fear of not being enough. Seb says, if I'm criticized, I must defend. But what if you didn't? What if you simply listened, filtered, and chose your response, not from fear, but from presence? That's authorship. That's what it means to take the pen back. It doesn't mean you never feel anger or sadness or discomfort again. It means you're no longer reacting from an unconscious place. You're responding with awareness, that space between trigger and reaction. That's where your freedom lives. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived unspeakable suffering, said it this way: between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Think about how different life feels. When you stop reacting from the old script, someone interrupts you, and instead of jumping to reclaim your voice, you observe, you breathe, you respond calmly. Or maybe not at all, not because you're weak, but because you've realized not every moment deserves your energy. You've stopped auditioning for people who don't hold the power to validate you. That shift isn't subtle, it's transformatio. Now, it's the moment you move from being emotionally controlled to emotionally in control. Not controlled as in robotic, but controlled as in present, conscious, grounded. When you no longer need to prove or win or be right just to feel secure. You've won something far deeper than any argument could offer. And you begin to notice the scripts that once controlled you, losing their grip. The need for approval fades. The fear of being misunderstood softens the urge to match someone else's aggression. With your own dissolves, you realize you don't have to mirror the chaos around you. You can be the calm that reminds people there's another way to live. Plato once said the first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. He wasn't talking about domination. He meant discipline, self-awareness, the quiet strength of someone who knows their worth and doesn't need to shout it, because when you're still running an old script, it's not just your emotions that suffer, it's your relationships, your peace, your potential. How many doors have you closed by reacting too quickly? How many connections have you damaged? Because the old story said, if they don't respect me, immediately cut them off. That story might have protected you once, but now it's probably keeping you small. Taking authorship of your reactions means you're no longer a puppet of past pain. You start recognizing the patterns, you feel the heat rising, and instead of acting on it, you sit with it. You ask yourself, what would my highest self do here? And then you do that even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Socrates once said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And if that feels heavy, let's flip it. The examined life is where you find your peace. That's where you begin to experience something rare, sovereignty over your inner world. That's not something someone gives you. That's something you claim. And yes, it takes work. Yes, it's uncomfortable at times. Watching yourself isn't always fun. But neither is staying stuck in patterns that keep you reactive, restless, and resentful. When you stop reacting from the script, you start writing something new. You stop being the echo of every harsh word you've ever heard. You stop playing out roles written by fear, ego, or childhood defenses. You start living from choice, and people around you will feel the difference. They'll notice. You don't flinch the way you used to, that you're not baited by sarcasm or passive aggression, that you don't need to win every interaction. You'll stop chasing closure from people who can't even give it to themselves. You'll stop needing every misunderstanding corrected sometimes. You'll just let it go, not because you're defeated, but because you've chosen peace over performance. That's emotional authorship, that's power. And here's what's even more beautiful. When you start living this way, your presence becomes medicine for yourself. And for others, you give people permission to slow down, to reflect, to drop their guard. Because your stillness reminds them that maybe, just maybe, they don't have to keep playing the same roles either. So the next time you feel triggered, remember this, that first surge of emotion isn't you. It's the script, and you don't have to follow it. You can pause, breathe, reclaim the pen, and write something better. Every time you do, you become less of a puppet and more of a presence, less of a reaction, and more of a response. And that right there is the path to peace, because the only real control you have is how you choose to show up. Not what they do, not what they say. Just you. Your awareness, your choices, your script. And if you've come this far, and something in you is waking up, if this resonates in a way you didn't expect, it's not by accident. You were meant to hear it. You didn't lose control when they said the words. You lost it the moment you took them personally. That's split. Second, when your heart tightened, your jaw locked, and your mind started spinning comebacks and judgments. That was the real surrender. The moment you got offended, you gave away your power, and most of us do it without even realizing it. Not because we're weak, but because we've been trained to believe offense is an automatic response. Someone insults you, you feel wounded. Someone disagrees with you, you feel threatened. Someone misunderstands you, and suddenly you feel invisible.
But what if that pain, that sting, that emotional drop wasn't something that happened to you,
but something you allowed? We live in a world where offense is currency. It's how people bond, gain attention, define themselves by what makes them angry. But when everything offends you, you're no longer responding to reality. You're reacting to a fragile self-image, one that requires constant protection and reinforcement, and that's exhausting. Aristotle once said, anybody can become angry.
That is easy.
But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, is not within everybody's power. He was pointing to something most people overlook. Real emotional power isn't found in reaction. It's found in restraint, in discernment, in choosing what deserves your energy. Because here's the thing, offense isn't objective. What hurts you might not even register for, so anyone else. It's not the event, it's your interpretation. It's the story your mind tells. The second something uncomfortable happens, they're disrespecting me. They don't value me. They're trying to hurt me. And once that narrative locks in, your nervous system reacts as if it's the truth. But offense isn't an alarm. It's a mirror. It reflects which parts of your identity are still fragile, still unhealed. That's where your real work lives, not in silencing the world around you, but in strengthening the world within you. Because when your sense of worth depends on everyone treating you perfectly, you're always at risk. One sharp word, one misstep, and your peace disappears. What makes someone truly unbothered isn't numbness, it's clarity. It's knowing your value doesn't rise or fall based on someone else's opinion. It's knowing you don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need every comment to be kind. You don't even need to be agreed with. What you need is to stop handing your power to people who haven't earned it. That power isn't taken from you. It's given every time you let someone's words decide your mood. Every time you shrink or explode to defend an identity. Every time you let offense define the moment instead of your principles. And the more that happens, the more you train your mind to look for disrespect, betrayal, or injustice, even when it's not there. Plato warned us long ago that we can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark. The real tragedy is when adults are afraid of the light, and that's exactly what happens. We become afraid of truth, of growth, of taking responsibility for ourselves, because it means we can no longer blame the world for how we feel, and that's uncomfortable at first, but it's also freeing. Because if you're not responsible for your reactions, you're just a puppet, always at the mercy of the next person's behavior, the next careless comment, the next disagreement. But if you are responsible, everything changes. You realize you have options. You can pause, reflect, refrain, choose. You can learn to ask better questions in the heat of the moment. Not, why are they like this, but why does this hit me so hard? Not how dare they, but what part of me still needs this kind of validation. That level of self-honesty might sting at first, but it liberates you because it puts the focus back where it belongs, on your inner world.
You start seeing offense not as an injury,
but as insight, as feedback, as a signal that something in you is still raw, still seeking approval, still trying to prove its worth. And when you can look at that without flinching, without running, without blaming, that's when you start to grow. Socrates once said, the secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Getting offended is often just fighting the old beliefs, old stories, old defenses. But when you stop feeding that loop, you can start building something stronger, a new default, rooted in confidence, composure, and quiet strength. You stop reacting from your wounds and start responding from your values. You become harder to provoke, not because you're colder, but because you're wiser, because you know the difference between something harmful and something merely uncomfortable, between disrespect and misunderstanding, between real threats and imagined ones. The moment you realize you don't have to respond to every challenge is the moment you step into a deeper kind of freedom. And that freedom isn't about letting people walk over you. It's about refusing to let them walk into your mind without permission. Say someone insults you. You hear it, you feel it, but you don't react. You don't internalize it. You watch it like a passing car. It's there. You notice it. But it doesn't hit you. That's not detachment. That's self-respect. You respect yourself enough not to let a few careless words rewrite your self-image. And when you operate from that place, your energy shifts. You stop needing to prove yourself in every interaction. You stop getting pulled into pointless arguments. You stop throwing away your peace like it's cheap and people feel it. They may not say it, but they sense the difference, that groundedness, that emotional weight, that quiet command that says, I'm not here to be triggered, I'm here to be free. Freedom in this sense isn't just about time or money or lifestyle. It's emotional sovereignty. It's knowing you're the one in charge of how you feel, not the world, not the crowd, not the algorithm, not the stranger in the comments. And yes, it's hard sometimes, especially when the insult feels personal, when it echoes something you already feared was true. That's when offense feels most justified, but it's also when the opportunity for growth is greatest, because it invites you to look inward and ask, is this something I believe about myself? If it is, work on it. If it's not, let it go. Either way, you win. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves that, quote, alone could change your life if you take it seriously. Because it shifts the whole focus from blame to clarity, from defensiveness to depth, from being a victim of every interaction to becoming the master of your inner experience. That doesn't mean you won't feel things. You will. You're human. But feeling something doesn't mean you have to act on it. And that's where power lives, in the space between the feeling and the action, in the choice to breathe instead of lash out, to listen instead of argue, to let the moment pass without turning it into a storm. So, next time you feel the sting of offense rising, remember, this is a fork in the road. You can give your power away, or you can keep it. You can replay the insult all night, or you can see it for what it is, a passing thought from someone who may not even understand themselves, because in the end, what offends you reveals more about you than it does about them. It points to the edges of your ego, the cracks in your confidence, the places you're still not fully at peace with who you are. And when you heal those places, the world stops feeling so loud, so hostile, so threatening. You start to move differently, speak differently, think differently. You don't walk into every room trying to protect yourself. You walk in already whole. It's about knowing you don't need to be offended to stand strong, and when you finally stop giving it away, that power becomes yours again, fully, quietly, permanently. When someone lashes out, mocks you, or treats you coldly for no clear reason, your first instinct might be to take it personally, to believe it's an attack, to feel like you did something wrong, or that you're somehow not enough. That's how we've been trained to think. If they're upset, it must be about us. If they're distant, we must have failed. But the deeper truth is this: they're not attacking you, they're bleeding on you. That anger, that sarcasm, that sharp look isn't a weapon aimed at your identity. It's a symptom of something unhealed in them. Pain has a way of leaking out. Sometimes it erupts, sometimes it festers silently. But it always shows up somewhere, and often it lands on whoever is nearby. You just happen to be standing there when it's spilled over. Carl Jung once said that knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. What he meant is this: the more you understand your own wounds, your own emotional history, the easier it becomes to see that others aren't trying to hurt you. They're trying to survive themselves, and sometimes survival looks like silence, sometimes control, sometimes cruelty. But in almost every case, it's just pain in disguise. Think about how you behave when you're hurting. Are you always clear, patient, open and kind when you're overwhelmed? scared, or grieving something privately? Probably not. That's not because you're a bad person. It's because pain narrows the mind. It turns the heart inward. It shuts down empathy. And that's what happens to others too. But here's where most people get stuck. They think recognizing someone else's pain means excusing their behavior. It doesn't. You can still set boundaries. You can still say this isn't okay. But you say it with clarity, not confusion. You say it without tying their pain to your worth. Because when someone disrespects you, the real danger isn't just what they say or do. It's what your mind makes of it. The interpretation, the story that forms. They ignored me, so I must not be valuable. They yelled at me, so maybe I deserved it.
These quiet conclusions are
where the real damage lives. But when you remember their behavior is about them, not you, something changes. You stop absorbing the energy. You stop replaying the moment on a loop. You don't carry it into your sleep. Your relationships, your self-image, you see the pain for what it is: misplaced, misdirected, misunderstood, but not yours to carry. Socrates taught that people aren't angry at you. They're angry at themselves for not being able to manage you. That's a humbling thought. What looks like an attack is often a reaction to their own lack of control, their own inner chaos. Your calm, your confidence, your silence reminds them of what they haven't resolved it, and sometimes that's enough to trigger them. It's not your job to fix them, but it is your responsibility not to internalize it. Because if you let their bleeding define you, you become a reflection of their wounds, not your truth. You start reacting instead of responding. You match their tone, you mirror their dysfunction, and slowly, without noticing, you become part of the pain cycle too. But there's another path, where you don't have to retaliate, one where you don't have to shrink, one where you simply stand in your strength and say, I see what this is, and it's not mine. That's not indifference, it's mastery. It's the kind of inner stillness that only comes when you realize your self-worth doesn't rise or fall with someone else's mood. Plato once wrote, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." He didn't say everyone deserves your energy, but he did remind us that most people carry something invisible, an old betrayal, a deep fear, a relentless voice in their head that never lets them rest. And when that pressure builds, it erupts often onto the wrong person. That doesn't mean you should accept mistreatment. It means you no longer mistake it for truth. This is how you hold your ground. You recognize the pain, you honor your own boundary. But you don't take the insult into your identity. Thank you. You don't let someone else's behavior rewrite your story. You just let it pass. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough not to need their validation. And over time, something remarkable happens. You start seeing patterns that were invisible. Before you notice how often people lash out after being hurt, how quickly coldness follows insecurity, how silence often masks fear of rejection. Suddenly, the behavior that once confused or wounded you becomes easier to interpret. You stop guessing what's wrong with you and start understanding what's unresolved in them. That shift is subtle, but it's everything. It's the difference between spending hours trying to fix yourself to win someone's approval and spending that same time returning to your own peace. It's the difference between reacting with anger and responding with clarity. It's the difference between making someone else's wounds about you and letting them stay where they belong. But let's be honest, this isn't easy, especially when the words cut deep. When they come from someone you love or trusted. In those moments, it's natural to feel shaken. That's okay. You're not a robot. You're not here to be untouched. But you are here to be aware, to notice the reaction, to witness it, and remind yourself this pain is theirs, not mine. Because the moment you internalize it, you make it part of your identity. And once it's in there, it becomes harder to shake. You carry it into the next interaction, the next relationship, the next version of yourself. And before you know it, your reflection is shaped not by truth, but by wounds that never belonged to you. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. So is peace, so is presence. So is emotional freedom. It's not a one-time epiphany. It's a daily choice to return to your center, to see things clearly, to feel the pain without becoming it. The next time someone is sharp with you, try this pause. Take one breath. Then say silently, "This is their storm, not mine." You don't need to fix it. You don't need to understand it. You just need to know it's not a reflection of you. And if that helps, even once, if it saves your peace for one day, then it's worth it, because the people who bleed on you may never know the impact of their words, but you do. And that awareness gives you something rare, the ability to stop the cycle, to end the transfer of pain, to feel what's happening around you without letting it redefine what's happening within you. So when the world gets loud, and the comments get sharp, and people around you forget their own worth and try to project it onto you, stay rooted, not defensive, not dismissive, just steady. No one tells you this when you're young, but the deepest emotional pain you'll feel in life often won't come from what people do. It'll come from what you expected them to do. And they didn't. That sting you carry, the disappointment that lingers, the tension you replay late at night. It's usually not about the words said or the silence that followed. It's about the invisible contract you were holding, the one that said, if I'm kind, they'll respect me. If I show up, they'll value me. If I'm honest, they'll never hurt me. But no one signed that contract, except you. And when life doesn't follow your script, it feels like betrayal. But it's not betrayal. It's life being life. It's people being human. And it's you slowly learning your expectations were never guarantees, they were silent demands the world never agreed to. Aristotle once said hope is a waking dream, but unexamined expectations are more like sleeping traps. You walk into them blindly thinking the world owes you something, thinking people will love you the way you love them, thinking fairness is a rule, not a hope. And when those expectations collapse, it doesn't just hurt. It breaks a version of reality you thought was secure. We don't often realize it, but most of our emotional suffering is thwarted, not consciously, not with malice, but through the quiet, constant creation of inner contracts with our friends, partners, family, even strangers. We walk through life believing, if I do this, I should get that. But life doesn't work like a vending machine. You don't insert kindness and always get appreciation. You don't give your best and automatically receive fairness. People don't play by rules they never knew they were part of. And that's where the pain comes from. When someone forgets to acknowledge your effort, it cuts, not because of the act itself, but because of what you expected in return. When you open up to someone and they pull away, it burns. Not because sharing was wrong, but because you assumed they'd hold space for you. We don't just get hurt by what happens, we get hurt by what we thought should happen instead. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, but I'd add that the most freeing thing might be to accept others as they are too. Not as we hoped they'd be, not as we assumed they'd act, but as they actually show up, because when you stop expecting people to behave like versions of themselves you created in your mind, you finally let reality breathe, and with that breath comes peace." This doesn't mean giving up on standards or tolerating harm. It means a difference between a value and an expectation. A value is how you choose to live. An expectation is how you believe others should live in response. One gives you power, the other slowly drains it. Plato once said, "Wise people speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something in a similar way. Wise people give because it's who they are, not because they're trying to force an outcome." When you remove the hidden strings from your actions, you start doing things from love, not leverage. That's rare, and that's powerful. Think of how often you've felt let down by someone who didn't even know they were reading from a script you wrote in your head. You thought they should know better, they should have said something, they should have shown up. But maybe they weren't trying to hurt you. Maybe they were just being themselves, imperfect, unaware, operating from their own unspoken scripts. And maybe the real pain wasn't from what they did, but from what you expected them to do and never questioned until it was too late. Socrates reminded us the only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing. That includes knowing how someone should respond or what someone should feel. The truth is, we barely understand ourselves fully. So expecting others to meet us exactly where we think they should, at the exact emotional level we hoped for, sets you up to suffer. What if you started giving without needing something in return? What if you loved people for who they are, not who you hope they'll become? What if you let kindness be your baseline, not your bargaining chip? That's not weakness. That's emotional freedom, because the moment you release the emotional contracts, those silent agreements where you believed your effort should guarantee you something, you start seeing people and situations more clearly. You respond based on values, not resentments. You stop punishing people for failing to fulfill roles they never auditioned for. It's not easy at first.
The ego loves to keep score. I did this.
Why didn't they do that? But the soul doesn't play that game. The soul gives. The soul forgives. The soul moves on. Not to avoid pain, but because it knows clinging to invisible contracts only leads to bitterness. And that bitterness is like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to feel it. Let it go. Write a new kind of contract. One that only involves you, one that says, I will speak honestly, I will show up fully, I will act with integrity, not because I expect a return, but because that's who I've chosen to be. That's where real strength begins. That's where you stop being controlled by disappointment. Because disappointment doesn't come from others, it comes from your story about them. Carl Jung also said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, and what irritates us most is when people don't act. How we imagine when reality doesn't match the emotional contract we were secretly holding. But instead of using that as fuel for frustration, use it as fuel for growth. Ask, what was I expecting? Why did I expect that was that fair? Sometimes it's not about lowering your expectations, it's about letting go of the hidden ones. The ones you never voice, the ones you didn't even know were running the show. Once those are gone, something beautiful takes their place. Gratitude. You start to appreciate people for what they do bring, not just what they don't. You begin to see life, not as something that owes you a return on every investment, but as something rich in unpredictability. And oddly enough, when you stop expecting so much from others, they often show up more sincerely because there's no pressure, no score, keeping no silent weight they can feel but can't understand. You're just free. And if you've ever wondered why life feels so heavy, sometimes it's not always because of what's happening. It's often because of what you expected to happen and now have to release. Most of the pain you carry isn't from what the world does to you. It's from who you think you have to be in it. The person you believe you are, or more accurately, the person you think you're supposed to be, is often the very reason you feel offended, rejected, or overwhelmed that identity. The image you've been shaping and protecting for years isn't just how you see yourself. It's a contract your ego wrote behind your back, full of terms you never consciously agreed to, yet follow every single day. It says things like, if I'm smart, I can't be wrong. If I'm kind, people must treat me gently. If I'm successful, everyone should respect me. These rules seem invisible, but you feel them. Every time someone touches a nerve, questions you, interrupts you, underestimates you, or doesn't see you the way you see yourself, something inside tightens, and it's not just discomfort, it's fear. Fear that this identity you've built is being challenged. And if it breaks, you're left wondering what's underneath. Plato once said, the first and best victory is to conquer self. But how do you conquer something you don't fully understand? Most people don't realize the image they're defending isn't who they truly are. It's a mask, a performance, a structure of beliefs built on experience, repetition, and the need to survive emotionally. It's not evil, it's not wrong, but it's fragile. And that's the problem you suffer every time the world doesn't match your inner script. If someone calls you lazy and you see yourself as hardworking, the sting isn't in their words. It's in the clash if someone ignores you. And you pride yourself on being important. The pain isn't in the silence, it's in what it says about your value. Your identity resists anything that contradicts its narrative. And when it resists, it creates conflict inside first. Then outside. Carl Jung said, we cannot change anything unless we accept it. And that includes the self. But acceptance doesn't mean passivity. It means recognizing the parts of you built on fear, approval, and pressure. And being willing to let them soften, being willing to question them, because when you ask, who am I really, most people respond with roles, titles, labels. I'm a good person, I'm a leader, I'm not someone who gets disrespected. But these identities are often built defensively, not to express who we are, but to avoid who we fear being, so we hold tightly, and the tighter we hold, the more easily we break. What if your identity contract didn't need defending? What if you didn't need to be seen as right all the time, or strong all the time, or unbothered all the time? What if you could just be without explanatio, without apology, without the mental gymnastics of proving who you are? Socrates reminded us the unexamined life is not worth living, and when you really examine your emotional patterns, you often find that pain follows protection. The more you protect an identity, the more vulnerable you become to anything that threatens it. That's not confidence. That's a prison, because then your peace depends on how others see you, how they speak to you, whether they get you or not. But freedom is knowing who you are at your core, beyond the job, the compliments, the reputation. It's being secure in your character. Even when someone questions your behavior, it's being rooted in your values. Even when someone misunderstands your actions, it's the quiet, knowing that you don't have to be seen as perfect to be whole. Aristotle believed knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, but knowing yourself means more than being aware of your preferences or goals. It means being willing to dismantle the identity you've built. If it's keeping you from peace, it means asking, is this version of me helping me grow? Or just keeping me safe, safe from judgment, safe from rejection, safe from ever having to admit you're still learning, still evolving, still unfinished. And when you let go of the identity contract, something surprising happens. You become less reactive. You stop seeing every disagreement as a personal attack. You stop needing every interaction to affirm who you are. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to chase every lost perception. You can let people think what they think because you know who you are, and that knowing doesn't need defending. But here's the paradox. The ego convinces you that defending your image is strength, that being seen as certain, unshakable, and always composed is the goal. But real strength is humility. It's being able to say, yes, I used to believe that I've changed, or maybe I was wrong, or I don't need to convince you that's not weakness, that's power. Because now your identity isn't rigid, it's alive. It breathes, it adapts, it evolves, and it doesn't collapse every time someone pushes back. Think about how much energy you've spent managing your image, how many words you've used explaining yourself, how many moments you've lost replaying a comment just because someone didn't see you the way you wanted to be seen. That's not living, that's reacting. And reaction is always rooted in fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of not being enough. Fear that if the image cracks, you'll fall apart. But you won't, because you're not the image. You are the awareness behind it. Carl Jung, a LSO, said the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you were told to be, not who you think you have to be, who you truly are. When you strip away the labels, the pressure, the performance, that version of you doesn't need applause, it doesn't need defense, it just exists, steady, present, and real. And when you start living from that place, you become untouchable in a different way. Not because nothing affects you, but because nothing defines you without your permission. You're no longer chained to reactions. You respond from clarity, from wholeness, from depth. That's why the person you think you are the one you've been holding on to is often the root of your suffering, because as long as your peace depends on protecting that version, you'll never feel safe. You'll always be chasing approval, dodging criticism, trying to stay inside the lines of an identity that may have served you once, but now just limits you. So tear up the contract. You don't need to be the smartest in the room, or the most respected, or the most agreeable. You just need to be honest with yourself about what you're still clinging to, about the parts of you that still feel they need to earn love, respect, or belonging. And once you can admit that you're already free, because now you're not driven by image, you're guided by truth, your truth, the one that doesn't require performance or perfection. just presence. At some point you learn to wear a mask,
Not the kind from costume shops.
but the invisible kind, the smile when you're hurt, the silence when you want to scream, the confidence that hides uncertainty. It didn't happen all at once. Maybe you started shrinking your truth in a relationship to keep the peace. Maybe you held back your pain to avoid seeming dramatic. Or maybe you overachieved, over-explained, overcompensated just to feel like you were finally enough. The mask isn't evil. It was born from survival, from moments when it felt safer to perform than to be seen. It helped you navigate a world that isn't always kind to authenticity. But over time, the mask stopped being a tool and started becoming your identity. You forgot where it ended, and you began. And now, you're exhausted. Not because you're weak, but because living out of alignment is one of the heaviest things a person can carry. Every interaction becomes a calculation. Every conversation, a performance. Every room you enter feels like a stage, where you measure your words, tone down your opinions, or play the part others expect of you. Carl Jung said the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but before you can become that person, you have to release who you're pretending to be, the version built to impress, to protect, to please. That version might have earned you approval, but it never brought you peace. It might have kept you liked, but it didn't make you feel loved. Not really. Because deep down you always knew they weren't loving you, just the mask. And that's where suffering begins, because pretending is a kind of betrayal. A soft one, a subtle one, but a betrayal. Nonetheless, every time you silence your truth to be accepted, a piece of your soul pays the price. Every time you laugh at something that hurts you, downplay your needs, or act unaffected when you're actual. Why? Falling apart, the gap between who you are and who you present widens. Socrates once said, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom," but knowing yourself requires looking at the parts you've hidden, not just from others, but from yourself. It means asking the hard questions. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I believe when I stop trying to be agreeable? What do I actually want? Not just what's expected. The answers might shake you. They might unravel the persona you've spent years building. But what's waiting on the other side is something far more real and far more peaceful. Because when you burn the mask, you stop negotiating for belonging. You stop earning your worth through performance. You stop fearing being misunderstood. Because you finally understand yourself. Aristotle said happiness belongs to the self-sufficient, and self-sufficiency isn't just about material independence. It's about emotional sovereignty. It's the ability to show up as you are unapologetically and let the world respond however it will. Some people will draw closer, some will walk away. But either way, you're finally being seen, not for the role, not for the reputation, but for the soul beneath it all. There's a kind of freedom that only comes when you stop protecting the mask. It's not loud, not dramatic. It's quiet and saintly. It looks like speaking honestly even. When your voice trembles, it looks like choosing peace over perfection. It looks like no longer needing to prove your value in every room you walk into. And no, it doesn't mean abandoning growth. It means you grow from truth. Not pressure. You develop, not to become worthy, but because you already are. You're not chasing wholeness anymore. You're returning to it. People will feel the difference. When you live without a mask, your presence becomes magnetic, not because you're trying to impress, but because you're real. Because people sense when someone is grounded in their truth. There's a quiet strength in it, a peace that doesn't need explaining. The world may not always reward it, but your soul will. Carl Jung also reminded us, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But if you can do that, if you can look at your fears, flaws, and desires without turning away, you'll stop needing the mask. Because now you're not hiding from others. You're no longer hiding from yourself. Most people move through life, hoping it'll be smooth, calm, predictable. They say things like, "I just want peace," or "I can't handle another problem right now," as if life should wait until they feel ready. But life doesn't ask permission. Chaos doesn't knock before entering. The question is never if it'll arrive, it's how you'll handle it when it does. That's the difference between being reactive and being ready. Emotional resilience isn't built in peaceful moments. It's built before the storm in silence through something the Stoics called the premeditation of misfortunes. The idea was simple but powerful. Picture what could go wrong before it does. So you're not blindsided, not to create fear, not to attract suffering, but to rehearse your response, to train your mind for impact. Before impact hits, most people never do this. They walk around with unspoken assumptions. Today will go well. People will be respectful. Nothing will go wrong. So when someone's rude, when a plan falls apart, when emotions run high, they collapse, not because the situation was unbearable, but because they never mentally prepared, and what you don't prepare for will own. You imagine starting your day with just 2 minutes of this kind of rehearsal. You pause and think, today I might be ignored. Someone might disappoint me. I might feel triggered, and then you mentally walk through those scenarios, not with panic, but with calm. You picture someone rolling their eyes. You feel the tension rise, and instead of reacting, you breathe. You choose silence. You picture yourself grounded. What you're doing in that moment is building scaly, not physical muscle, but emotional muscle. And like all muscle, it only grows through resistance. The Stoics weren't pessimists. They weren't obsessed with pain. They were wise enough to know that the best way to stay calm is to expect the heat and rehearse staying cool inside it. Aristotle said, we become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, brave by doing brave acts. But how do you start acting brave if you've never practiced it in your mind?
The brain doesn't fully distinguish between imagination
and reality. Athletes use mental rehearsal. So do performers, soldiers, surgeons. Why not you? When you rehearse chaos before it finds you, you shift from being emotionally fragile to emotionally prepared. You no longer rely on circumstances to keep you balanced. You rely on training. And that training is simple. Picture the hard thing and picture yourself moving through it with grace. Think about how powerful that is. Someone interrupts you in a meeting. In the past, your heart would have jumped. Your pride would have snapped back. But now you've already seen this before in your mind. You've trained for this, so you pause, you breathe, you let the moment pass without letting it control you. That pause is the product of rehearsal. Direct your life, and you'll call it fate. This kind of mental rehearsal is how you make the unconscious conscious. You shine light on the situations that usually trigger you and say, I see you coming, and because you've already practiced your piece, you don't have to build it in the middle of the storm. This isn't about becoming paranoid. It's about becoming prepared. Life will bring discomfort. That's not a flaw in the system. It's part of the design. People will misunderstand you. Delays will happen. People you love will disappoint you. If you expect smoothness, every bump feels like an attack. But if you've rehearsed the bumps, you glide over them, not because they don't hurt, but because they don't surprise you. Socrates once said, the secret of change is to focus all your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Rehearsing chaos isn't about obsessing over the past. It's about building new wiring in your mind. So when tension comes, you don't default to panic or blame. You default to stillness. You become like a ship that doesn't sink when the waves hit. Not because it never encountered a storm, but because it was built for one. That's what you're doing every time you mentally walk through a difficult moment, and train your reaction not to be perfect, but to be present, not to control the world, but to stay in control of yourself. And here's what happens when you live this way. The world stops feeling so threatening, not because it changes, but because you do. You stop fearing people's opinions because you've already rehearsed not needing them. You stop dreading tough conversations because you've already imagined staying grounded through them. You stop reacting to every inconvenience like it's personal because you've trained your mind to see it as a test, not an attack. Peace is a practice. Strength is a rehearsal. You don't become calm by accident. You become calm by choice, made over and over in your thoughts before the moment arrives. So start small each morning. Ask yourself, what could challenge me today? Who might frustrate me? What could go wrong? And then picture yourself responding not with anger or fear, but with awareness. Breathe into it. Don't run from the scenario. Meet it with your mind. That's your mental gym. That's where resilience is born. It's not the pain that breaks you. It's the fact that you didn't see it coming. The betrayal, the silence, the shift in someone's energy. The moment it hits, your chest tightens, not just from the sting, but from the shock. How could they do this? Why now? Where did this come from? That's the real wound. The pain is sharp, yes, but the surprise is what makes it unbearable. You expected something else. That's why it hurts. You assumed loyalty would be returned, that your effort would be seen, that someone would treat you the way you would have treated them. And when they didn't, it shattered. Not just the moment, but your belief in how things were supposed to go. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was the disruption of your inner world. We don't suffer most from injury. We suffer from disorientation.
Aristotle once said the aim of the wise is not to secure pleasure,
but to avoid pain. But even the wise cannot avoid all pain. What they avoid is being shocked by it because they expect it, not cynically, but in a prepared way. They rehearse the possibility. They leave space for life to be unpredictable, for people to be imperfect. And in that space, they cushion themselves from collapse. The moment you think the world owes you consistency, you've set yourself up to be knocked off center. You might not realize it, but you carry expectations around like invisible glass towers. You build them without warning, stack them on people, plans and circumstances. And when life bumps into them, and it always does, they shatter and you call it pain. But it wasn't the bump, it was the blindness. You didn't think it could happen, that they could change, that life could turn so quickly. And so you crumble not because you're weak, but because surprise feels like betrayal, and betrayal, even when unintentional, shakes the foundation. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists," and we resist, acknowledging that people are unpredictable, that outcomes can shift, that tomorrow isn't promised. So we cling to how we think things should unfold, and when they don't, we interpret the change as suffering. But what if you stopped expecting smoothness? What if instead you built your inner world flexible enough to absorb the impact? That doesn't mean living in fear. It means walking into life with open eyes, seeing clearly, preparing your mind not for disaster, but for reality. The Stoics understood this. They practiced the premeditation of adversity. They'd wake and ask themselves, who might upset me today? What hardship might I face? Not because they were pessimists, but because they knew pain is inevitable. But being shocked by it is optional. It's the difference between being hit and being caught off guard. You've felt this. Before the moment you were criticized out of nowhere, the breakup you didn't expect, the job you thought was secure that suddenly vanished, the pain itself you could have handled. But the story, your mind told the story that said this isn't how it was supposed to go. That's what broke you. So Rates reminded us that whoever isn't content with what he has wouldn't be content with what he'd like to have. That includes emotional expectations. If you demand constant ease, constant praise, constant alignment with your ideals, you'll live in a state of emotional fragility. Every deviation becomes devastation. But when you begin to expect that pain is part of the journey, not the enemy, but the teacher, you start moving differently. You stop reacting like a victim and start responding like a student. You stop asking why me and start asking what. Now the surprise fades.
the shock softens, and what remains is clarity. That clarity says, yes, it hurts,
but no, I'm not broken. It says, I didn't see this coming, but I was ready anyway. That's a powerful place to live from. It's not about anticipating every event. You can't. Life will always hold surprises, but it is about shifting your relationship to those surprises, learning not to build your identity around what you expect, but around how you adapt. When someone lets you down, it doesn't shake your foundation because you never built it on them. In the first place, when plans fall through, you adjust because you never believed control was your security. When life turns, suddenly you pause because your strength comes from response, not prediction.
This mindset won't
eliminate pain, but it will eliminate the extra pain, the confusion, the disbelief, the spiraling. It will let you feel what's real without being consumed by what's imagined. Plato said, Reality is created by the mind, and we can change our reality by changing our mind. When you stop believing life must always align with your hopes and start accepting that it often won't, you stop being thrown every time it doesn't. You become steady, you become ready, and in that readiness, peace begins to grow. So the next time life hits hard, pause. Ask yourself, is this pain real, or is this the result of surprise? And if it's the surprise, smile quietly. You just found your edge. Now it's time to round it out. Anger doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simmers, sometimes it explodes, sometimes it looks like control, and sometimes it looks like collapse. But almost every time, if you really strip it down, it's not about principle, it's about ego. That voice inside whispering, how dare they? The one that takes things personally, that needs to be right, that equates being challenged with being disrespected. The truth is, anger, especially the kind that owns you, isn't a noble defender of justice. It's usually just pride, wearing a costume. We love to think our anger is justified. We say things like, I'm just standing up for myself, or I won't let anyone treat me that way. But beneath those phrases is often a fragile identity, trying to protect itself from being pierced. We confuse ego preservation with personal integrity, but they're not the same. Carl Jung said everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That irritation, that quick surge of emotion, is a flare not from the world, but from within it, signals. Where we've attached our worth to something external, someone's approval, someone's tone, someone's understanding, and when that external thing shifts, our ego scrambles, it panics, it burns, and that fire becomes our reaction. Anger can feel powerful, even clarifying, even addictive. Because it gives you something to hold when things feel out of control, it becomes a mask for deeper emotions. You don't want to face shame, insecurity, fear of not being seen, and so instead of asking, why does this hurt, you say, they shouldn't have done that. The attention shifts outward, the energy turns defensive, the wound hides. Socrates once said, an unexamined life is not worth living, and an unexamined anger is especially dangerous. Because it convinces you it's noble, that it's honest, that it's who you are. But anger left unexamined becomes a tool of the ego. It doesn't ask for truth. It demands dominance. It doesn't see peace. It seeks validation. We've all felt it the moment someone interrupts you, and your body tightens when you're criticized, and your pride jumps to defend when you're misunderstood, and you feel the urge to correct, to shout, to prove. But those reactions don't come from clarity. They come from identity, from the unconscious belief that I must be seen a certain way, or I am not enough. Aristotle said, anybody can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. That kind of anger is rare, because most people don't pause to check the source. They just let it spill onto loved ones, onto strangers, onto themselves, and then live in the aftermath. Apologies, guilt, distance, regret. But what if you did pause? What if in that heated moment, instead of speaking from fire, you asked yourself, what part of me feels threatened right now? That question softens the edges. It brings light to the ego's grip, and once you see it, you're no longer held hostage by it. The ego thrives in silence. In your silence, it grows when you don't examine your reactions. When you confuse volume with truth, when you let pride speak louder than presence, but when you bring awareness into the heat, the ego shrinks, not instantly boo. Steadily. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming conscious, so your anger doesn't destroy what you're trying to protect. So you stop fighting for your identity and start living from your essence. There's a difference. One is reactive, defensive, exhausting. The other is calm, grounded, free. Plato said, wise people speak because they have something to say. Fools, because they have to say something when anger rules you. You have to say something you feel compelled to defend, to prove, to explain. But when you're grounded in truth, you can speak only when it serves peace. You can stay silent, not out of weakness, but out of power. And here's the paradox. The less you act from ego, the more people feel your strength. You stop chasing validation and start radiating stability. You stop needing to win arguments and start owning your energy.
People feel safer around you, not
because you're passive, but because you're not explosive, because your calm is real. So when anger comes and don't fight it, don't shame it, just slow it down, peel it back. Ask yourself, what am I protecting right now? What belief about myself feels at risk? And then breathe, because that breath is where you take your power back. You won't always get it right. You'll snap. Sometimes that's okay. Growth isn't perfect, but every you choose reflection over reaction. You rewrite the script. You become less controlled by pride, more anchored in truth. Most people think power is loud, that it looks like dominance, quick words, sharp comebacks, that if you don't speak up immediately, you've lost the moment. But real power, deep grounded, unshakable power, often looks like stillness, not because you have nothing to say, but because you're strong enough to wait. Because you've realized silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom in the space between reaction and response. There's a door. Most people rush right past. Something gets said. Emotions rise, and the mouth opens before the mind catches up. But when you pause, when you say nothing and feel everything, you enter that door. That's where awareness lives. That's where you stop being driven by emotion and start observing it. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. The sacred pause is how you begin making the unconscious conscious. It's how you step outside the automatic programming, the defensiveness, the insecurity, the ego, and ask what's really going on in me right now. That one breath, that one beat of silence tells you more than 1,000 words ever could. It shows you where your wounds are, where your triggers live, where our values begin and your pride ends. It reveals whether you're about to speak from clarity or from fear, whether what you're about to say is helpful or just habitual. We live in a culture that idolizes speed, quick replies, instant opinions. But wisdom doesn't rush, truth doesn't shout, and the people who've mastered themselves the most aren't the ones with the best arguments. They're the ones who can hold silence without needing to fill it. Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. But self-knowledge doesn't arrive in the middle of an emotional storm. It comes in the stillness, in the pause, in the choice, not to lash out just because something stung. When you feel everything without reacting to all of it, you gain access to something most people never touch: discernment. You learn the difference between pain and truth, between urgency and importance, between what needs to be said now and what's better left unspoken. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not defend yourself, not because you're surrendering, but because you no longer need every moment to prove something. You're not building your identity on reactions anymore. You've outgrown that you'd rather be at peace than be right. You'd rather be aligned than be loud. Socrates reminded us that the greatest way to live with honor in this world is to actually be what we pretend to be. And most of us pretend to be strong, but strength isn't in dominance. It's in discipline, in the ability to hold your energy, to observe the chaos without becoming it, to stay grounded even when your emotions beg you to speak. This doesn't mean you suppress how you feel. It means you feel more, not less. You feel deeper, because when you don't rush to react, you finally hear the full message. Your emotions are trying to send you. Realize the anger is protecting something vulnerable, that the sadness isn't weakness, it's longing, that the anxiety is pointing to where you still seek control. And you can sit with all of it without judgment. This is emotional sovereignty, the ability to respond from awareness rather than react from conditioning. And the beautiful part, that pause grows stronger every time you choose it. Every moment you decide to wait, to breathe, to feel without responding. You're strengthening a muscle, retraining your nervous system, becoming a calmer, more powerful version of yourself. One who can weather storms, not because they don't hurt, but because you're no longer swept away by every wave. Plato said, wise people speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something. The sacred pause gives you time to discover which one you're about to be. And if you wait long enough, if you let the emotion pass through fully, you'll notice something remarkable. What felt like urgency often fades. What felt like injustice often softens. What felt like an emergency often turns out to be just another test of your presence. Saying nothing doesn't mean doing nothing. It means choosing what comes next rather than letting emotion choose for you. That's real freedom. That's what separates those owned by their reactions from those who own their responses. So the next time your emotions rise, pause, say nothing. Feel everything, let the moment show you who you really are underneath the impulse. Let it teach you about your patterns, your growth, your inner landscape. Let the silence speak louder than your ego, because your true power doesn't come from what you say, it comes from what you don't need to say. It's easy to point the finger outward, to say they disrespected you, they triggered you, they made you feel small. The mind does it so quickly, so naturally. Someone rolls their eyes, interrupts you, forgets to include you, and instantly the blame lands outside. But what if the discomfort you feel in those moments doesn't actually come from them? What if the mirror isn't facing outward at all? What if it's turned inward? What if the reflection you're reacting to is your own? It's not them. It's what they awakened in you. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That irritation, that tightness in your chest, that heat behind your eyes is a flare, not a weapon, not an attack. A flare pointing you toward an unhealed part of yourself. And if you're willing to really look, you'll see it's not the other person you're at war with. It's the story you've been telling yourself for years. The story that says you have to be liked to be worthy, that you must always be right to be respected, that if someone doesn't choose you, there must be something wrong with you. These stories live deep and sit silently until someone usually unintentionally bumps into them. When that happens, it's not their behavior alone that hurts. It's the echo of the wound inside. That's why the same situation can make one person explode and another stay calm. It's not the moment, it's the meaning, the filter, the history underneath. Think about it. You're ignored in a conversation. One part of you brushes it off, another spirals. Why? Because being ignored might not just feel rude, it might remind you of something older, a moment where you felt invisible as a child, a time your voice didn't matter. The pain isn't new, it's been waiting, and the other person just held up the mirror. But most people don't pause long enough to see that they react, they point. They push the discomfort away instead of pulling it closer and asking, why does this moment feel so sharp? The world becomes a minefield full of potential threats, when in truth, the only thing being threatened is an idea you've wrapped around your identity. Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. But self-knowledge isn't always pleasant. It asks you to stop blaming and start investigating. It requires the courage to say, it's not just what they did, it's what it touched in me. That shift is hard, but it's the doorway. Because once you take responsibility for your reaction, you regain power, not power over others, power over yourself. You stop being controlled by every glance, every tone, every offhand comment. You see the trigger, you feel the pain, but now instead of projecting it outward, you trace it inward. And that tracing leads you somewhere real. You may find an old belief that no longer serves you, or a part of yourself you've been neglecting, or a version of you that still feels young and unworthy. And suddenly, the moment that looked like rejection becomes an invitation to heal, not just defend. Socrates once said the shortest and surest way to live with honor in the world is to actually be what we would appear to be. And in reality, we're not as calm as we pretend, not as healed, not as unfazed. The mirror moments, the ones that provoke us, reveal where the work is still unfinished. And that's not failure, that's guidance. You don't need to be ashamed of your reactions. You just need to be curious about them, to sit with them long enough to ask, what part of me still believes this? Because once you truly see it, you can begin to choose differently. The next time someone disrespects you, pause. Ask, what belief about myself is being activated right now? The next time someone leaves you out, ask, why does this make me feel abandoned? You'll start noticing a pattern. You'll stop reacting to the person and start responding to the pain, and that's when healing begins. Because when you realize the mirror is inside, you stop needing the world to fix itself for you to be okay. You stop demanding perfect behavior from imperfect people just to feel whole. You no longer require constant reassurance, constant agreement, constant validation. You understand the world will keep reflecting. And your job is to keep looking. Plato said, "The greatest wealth is to live content with little, that includes needing little from others to maintain your peace when your sense of stability comes from self-awareness, not external behavior. You become far more resilient, far more grounded, far more present. And when you live like that, people notice, not because you tell them, but because you stop reacting like someone desperate to control the narrative. You stop fighting shadows. You stop chasing apologies. You let people be who they are, and let those moments teach you about who you are. So the next time someone shows you something uncomfortable, don't just flinch and walk away. Don't rush to defend or correct. Ask yourself, what is this showing me about me? Most people live trapped inside their own reactions. They hear a tone, see a look, feel an energy shift, and suddenly they're deep in it, defending themselves, overthinking, matching the other person's mood without even realizing it. But what if you could pull back? What if in the middle of the moment you didn't have to be the person experiencing it? You could simply watch them like you're not you. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. When you detach into observer mode, you step out of the emotional swirl and into clarity. You stop seeing the situation from inside your ego and start seeing it from above, like you're floating above the conversation, witnessing it like a quiet presence. The emotion doesn't disappear, but it doesn't own you anymore. You're no longer the puppet of your nervous system. You're the one holding the strings. Carl Jung once said, "Whoever looks outside dreams. Whoever looks inside awakens." But there's another level. Whoever looks from above understands that not every moment deserves a reaction, that most people are acting out their own scripts, their own habits, their own fears. And it has very little to do with you. Imagine someone speaks to you with sarcasm. The old reflex is to match it or shut down. But when you're in observer mode, you see it differently. You see their posture, their face, their tone. And instead of making it about you, you wonder what they might be carrying. You're not cold. You're just still. You don't absorb. You observe. You watch their behavior unfold, like it's happening in a film, and you realize you don't have to be pulled into their storm. That's presence. Socrates once said, "Whoever isn't a good servant will not be a good master." And before you can master anything, external relationships, communication, energy, you have to learn to serve your own mind, to step back from it, to notice when it's trying to pull you into a narrative that doesn't serve you. Observer mode isn't avoidance, it's leadership. It's saying, I choose awareness over reactivity. The moment you watch instead of react, you regain your freedom. The tension is still there, but now you're studying it, learning from it, and that learning gives you options. You can say less, you can choose silence, you can move your energy instead of matching theirs. It's not about pretending to be unaffected. It's about realizing you don't have to be swept away just because someone else is drowning. Plato said the measure of a person is what they do with power. But the greatest power isn't what you say, it's what you withhold the power to stay centered. When someone tries to shake you the power to let a moment breathe, instead of trying to control it, the power to see the game without needing to win it, most people don't have that power, because they've never practiced stepping outside their identity. They've never watched themselves in action. They've never asked, who am I being right now? But the moment you start watching, you start changing, because you can't improve what you don't observe. And you can't observe if you're always immersed. Start small. The next time you feel yourself getting tight, triggered, or anxious, pause. Imagine you're not you. You're just watching a person named you in a scene. You're studying their tone, their thoughts, their posture. You're noticing what's rising inside them. And what they're choosing to do with it, that space you just created, is the beginning of emotional sovereignty. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, the pause gets longer, the clarity gets sharper. You start noticing why you want to say something, where that reaction comes from. You don't judge it, you just see it. And that seeing is liberation. Aristotle said it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. That includes emotional thoughts, just. Because you feel it doesn't mean you have to act on it. Just because something stirs in you doesn't mean it needs to be unleashed. Observer mode teaches you how to hold the emotion without becoming it.
This is
How you grow without force. You stop chasing control and start cultivating presence. You stop needing everyone to act a certain way so you can feel okay. Instead, you trust your ability to remain grounded because you've trained for it, not with aggression, not with overthinking, but with awareness. And once you've lived from that place, once you've tasted the quiet power of watching instead of reacting, you won't want to go back. You'll start choosing peace. Not because you're afraid of conflict, but because you know what it costs to constantly be inside it. When someone disrespects you, it's easy to meet them with sharpness. When someone snaps at you, ignores you, or mocks you, it's natural to want to mirror that energy to strike back verbally or emotionally, because your pride flares up and demands justice. But what if the strongest counterpunch isn't anger or revenge? It's compassion, not the soft, overly sentimental kind. Not pity, real compassion. The kind that sees through the surface behavior and asks, what must they be carrying to act this way? It doesn't mean excusing bad behavior. It doesn't mean letting people walk over you. It means refusing to join them in their pain. You see it clearly for what it is, and instead of reacting, you rise above it. Because once you understand that most people's cruelty isn't born from power, but from suffering, you stop seeing enemies and start seeing wounds. Carl Jung CE said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but it can also lead us to an understanding of them. That bitterness you see in someone's tone probably didn't start with you. That coldness, that arrogance is usually a shield, something they learned to wear a long time ago. Maybe when someone hurt them, maybe when they decided never to be vulnerable again, and now it's hardened into their personality. You happened to be there when the wound showed up, but that doesn't mean it's about you. When you see someone lash out, ask yourself, is this strength? Or is this pain wearing armor? That one question shifts your entire posture. Suddenly you're not reacting, you're observing. And that observation gives you space. In that space, you find your real power. The ability to choose a response that doesn't add fuel to the fire. Plato wrote, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle that includes the person you can't stand. 1. Who said the thing you can't forget? The one who acted like you didn't matter. They're not exempt. Their pain might look different. Their defenses might be sharper, but the struggle is still there. And when you meet pain with more pain, you just multiply it. But when you meet it with clarity, with understanding, with compassion, you interrupt the pattern. You refuse to be pulled into their storm. You stay rooted, and that rattles people more than any insult ever could. Compassion isn't weakness. It takes immense strength to hold back when someone's trying to provoke you to stay calm. When your pride is screaming to listen, when your ego wants to speak to soften, when everything in you wants to harden. That's real power. Because it's power over yourself, over your impulses, over the part of you that wants to defend every wound. Socrates said the shortest and surest way to live with honor in the world is to actually be what we appear to be. We want to appear calm, wise, unshaken. But are we really most of the time? No, we're reactive. We want to win. We want to be right. We want to hurt back. But what we really want deep down is to feel whole again, to feel that no one, not even the cruelest person, can pull us out of ourselves, and that's exactly what compassion protects. It doesn't mean you don't feel hurt. It means you don't become that hurt. You feel it. Yes, you acknowledge it. But then you breathe and ask, what's the most powerful thing I can do here that doesn't cost me my peace? Sometimes that means saying less. Sometimes it means walking away. Sometimes it means responding gently when everything in you wants to be sharp, not for them, but for why? Oh, because you're not here to play small games. You're not here to let someone else's pain decide who you become in the moment. You're here to master yourself. Aristotle said to avoid criticism,
Say nothing, do nothing, be nothing.
But compassion isn't avoidance, it's presence. It's the highest level of emotional skill because it lets you protect your energy without needing to prove your strength. You stop keeping score. You stop needing the last word. You stop making everything personal. You start seeing people for what they carry, not just how they act. That perspective changes everything. It turns the rude stranger into a soul having a rough day, the passive-aggressive coworker into someone starved for recognition, the person who left you behind into someone who never learned how to stay. It doesn't erase your boundaries or remove consequences, but it does remove the poison. And when you remove the poison, your mind clears. You move on faster. You sleep deeper. You don't replay the same argument endlessly. You don't build imaginary speeches in the shower. You're free, not because they changed, but because you did. Compassion is the ultimate counterpunch, because it puts you in control of your voice, your energy, your narrative. It reminds you that you don't have to be anyone else's reflection. You can be your own light. There's something in you that wants to correct them. You hear the lie, the misunderstanding, the subtle jab, and a part of you tightens. You want to set the record straight, defend your name, your choices, your truth. And it feels like if you don't speak, if you don't respond, you're somehow agreeing or worse, surrendering. But what if you let them be wrong and let it mean nothing? That's where peace begins. Most of us think being right equals strength. That when someone misjudges us or twists a story, it's our responsibility to correct it, to stand up and speak our truth at all costs. But often the cost is much higher than we realize: our time, our energy, our calm, our sleep. And never stop to ask if it was even worth it. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter." How absurd to avoid facing their own soul. That includes arguing over things that don't need resolution, obsessing over misunderstandings that don't actually impact your life, chasing the illusion that if they just understood, you could finally rest. But peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from understanding yourself enough to know you don't need to be. We've all had moments where someone misrepresents us, tells the story in a way that puts them in the right and us in the wrong. And immediately the mind starts building a case, gathering evidence, rehearsing speeches. But all of that lives inside the same wound, the belief that our worth depends on their version of the truth. It doesn't. Aristotle said, "It's the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it." The same applies to criticism, to assumptions, to opinions thrown your way that miss the point entirely. You can hear them, even hold them in your mind for a moment, and choose not to accept them, not because you're afraid of conflict, but because you've finally reached a level of inner clarity where not everything deserves a response. Letting someone be wrong about you isn't weakness. It's strength in its most silent form. It says, "I know who I am, and I don't need your agreement to feel real." That doesn't mean you never speak up. It means you choose when to speak, based on purpose, not pride. You stop responding to bait. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop begging for fairness in conversations that were never about truth. To begin with, Socrates taught that strong minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Weak minds discuss people. When you engage in endless correction and defense, you often get pulled into that last category, discussing people, including yourself, in ways that go nowhere. But when you rise above the need to be right, you enter a quieter place, a clearer place, a higher place. And from there, something remarkable happens. The world becomes lighter. You realize not everyone needs to like you. Not every story needs correcting. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nod, say nothing, and keep walking. Not out of indifference, but out of discipline, because you know what peace costs, and you're no longer willing to trade it for the illusion of control. Let them think you're arrogant. Let them believe you were wrong. Let them paint you however they need to justify their own narrative. You don't have to carry their version of you into your next chapter. You don't have to waste hours reshaping a story that wasn't even true to begin with. Plato said,
Opinion is the medium between knowledge
and ignorance, and most of what people think about you is just that opinion filtered through their pain, their projections, their limited view. You don't need to argue with opinion. You just need to live your truth so fully, so freely that your life becomes the answer. That's the most powerful kind of correction. None at all. Just peace. Just presence. Just showing up again and again, aligned with your values, regardless of the noise around you. Because if you need them, agree with you to feel stable. Your peace will always be at risk. One conversation, one post, one sideways look, and you're spiraling again. But if you can let them be wrong, and let it mean nothing, you walk through life unshaken, not cold, not detached, just clear. The truth doesn't need to shout. Most people treat every insult like a fastball thrown straight at their chest. They catch it instinctively, grip it tightly, examine it, and carry it around for the rest of the day, sometimes the rest of their life. But what if you didn't have to catch it at all? What if, when the words came flying, sarcasm, judgment, passive aggression, you simply let them fall? No need to block it.
No need to dodge. Just watch it pass by.
And hit the ground with a quiet thud, useless, powerless, empty. That's the visualization. Someone says something cruel, sharp, designed to poke at you. And instead of reaching for it, you imagine it floating right past your energy field, untouched. Lands behind you like a dropped pebble. You keep walking. You didn't absorb it. You didn't react. You didn't let it in. You just didn't catch it. This sounds simple, but it takes practice, because for most of us, insults don't just land on the surface. They pierce, not because the words are sharp, but because something inside us believes them or fears they might be true. That's why they stick. They attach to old wounds, old doubts, and pull us into an emotional spiral. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. And that includes your reactions. Every time you catch an insult, you're revealing a part of yourself that hasn't fully healed, yet a place where you still crave approval, still doubt your worth, still feel the need to defend. But what happens when you start seeing insults as air sound without substance? Just another expression of someone else's energy, an energy you're not obligated to take on.
Suddenly the world becomes lighter, not because people stop throwing words,
but because you stop catching them. It's not about being indifferent. It's about being unavailable for what doesn't serve you. Socrates said, when the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. Most insults aren't about you at all. They're projections, expressions of someone's own tension, fear, or powerlessness. And once you stop personalizing them, you stop being controlled by them. Imagine every conversation like a tennis match. You don't have to swing at every ball that comes your way, especially when it's covered in venom. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Just let the ball bounce past you. Let the insult fall to the ground and dissolve. That kind of stillness of inner silence isn't passive, it's a declaration, a quiet refusal to be moved by every low vibration that passes through your space. It's you saying, my peace isn't up for negotiation. Not today. Aristotle wrote, anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, that is not easy. So don't be quick to anger. Be quick to observe. Be quick to remember. The insult isn't about you unless you decide it is. This is where visualization becomes a tool. When the words come, picture them physically. Watch them float toward you like paper birds. You don't have to swat them. You don't have to analyze them. Just let them fall. Watch them lose momentum and flutter to the floor unnoticed, unclaimed. And here's the magic. The more you practice this, the more naturally it happens. Over time, insults lose their power, not because you're numb, but because you're awake. Awake to who you are awake to. What's real awake to the fact that your energy is too valuable to spend reacting to things that don't even belong to you. That's what this visualization trains you to do. Preserve your peace in real time. You become the mountain that doesn't move. When the wind blows, not because you're stubborn, but because you're grounded in the truth that not every word deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves your engagement. Not every judgment needs correcting.
Let people be who they are. Let them speak from their pain if they must.
But don't catch it. Don't turn their noise into your problem. Let it fall. Most people want to be emotionally strong, but only in theory. They love the idea of being calm, grounded, unbothered, but when the trigger actually shows up, a late reply, a disrespectful tone, someone cutting them off in traffic, all that imagined strength disappears and they don't see it. But they're wasting the best opportunities life gives them to train. You don't build emotional strength by avoiding discomfort. You build it by facing small triggers every single day and choosing not to flinch. Think about the body. You don't grow stronger muscles by sitting still. You grow them by doing something that challenges them. Resistance, strain, effort. The process isn't always comfortable, but that discomfort is where growth begins. The same is true for the mind, and even more true for the emotions. Your triggers are your emotional weights. Every time someone irritates you and you don't react, every time you feel that flash of anger or jealousy or fear and you breathe through it instead of feeding it, you're rewiring your nervous system, retraining your emotional reflexes, building endurance where there used to be panic space, where there used to be impulse. Carl Jung said everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But it can also lead to mastery if you choose to work with it, if you choose to treat life as a gym, and your emotions as the muscles you're here to strengthen. Most people live in emotional reaction. Something happens, they respond automatically, no pause, no awareness, just a cycle, trigger, reaction, regret, repeat, and they wonder why they feel drained all the time. It's because they've never trained their emotional body. They're walking through life unconditioned, letting every bump, every tone, every delay knock them out of rhythm. But once you start training with your triggers, everything changes. You stop taking things personally. Not because you've become numb, but because you've become precise. You can feel the emotion rise. Observe it and choose what to do with it. That choice, that strength, that self-ownership, that's freedom. Say someone cuts you off in traffic. That moment heart jumps. Breath tightens. It's a rep. Not for your arms, but for your awareness. You can honk, curse, spiral. Or you can inhale. You can remember this is your training, that the other person is just a stranger you'll never meet again. But your reaction that stays with you, that shapes you, multiply that moment by 100 tiny moments a day. And you have your emotional gym, the coworker who interrupts you, another rep, the text you expected, but didn't get, another rep, the slow Wi-Fi, the spilled coffee, the passive-aggressive comment, rep. And with each one you get stronger, not by force, but by choice, not by pretending it doesn't bother you, but by staying conscious in the middle of it. Socrates said the secret of change is to focus all your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. So don't waste time fighting every trigger. Don't obsess over the fact that you got annoyed, or felt disrespected, or lost your patience. Instead ask, how can I use this? How can I let this become the rep I needed today? Emotional mastery isn't about never being triggered. It's about using your triggers as training partners. And that means you stop avoiding hard conversations. You stop ghosting situations that make you uncomfortable. You stop blaming the world for not being easier, and instead you get better at holding your ground inside it. You start to see frustration not as a problem, but as resistance you get to lift. You start to view envy not as something to suppress, but as something to examine. What is it pointing to? What can it teach me about my own unmet desires? Even sadness becomes part of the workout. When you let yourself feel it fully without letting it run your decisions, you're building emotional capacity, the ability to hold big energy without losing your direction. Aristotle said we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit that includes emotional excellence. If you want to be calm under pressure, you have to practice calm. When things feel pressurized, if you want to be patient, your daily annoyances are the arena. There's no magical transformation coming. There's only the choice to train again. And again, this kind of training rewires your brain. Your nervous system becomes less reactive. Your breathing deepens. Your default response slows down, and you start to feel something you may not have felt in a long time.
Space between stimulus.
And response space to choose something higher than your past patterns. Space to decide who you're becoming moment by moment. And that space is your evolution. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding discomfort, dodging triggers, escaping anything that pokes at their wounds. But you're not here for avoidance. You're here to grow, and that means walking toward the tension not with fear, but with purpose. Let our triggers, teach you. Let them expose your edges. Let them show you the parts of yourself still holding on to old beliefs, old insecurities, old reactions, and then each time you feel that familiar spark of irritation, of pride, of panic, pause. See it as a bell ringing at the start of a new set. Your moment to lift, your moment to choose, your moment to become who you say you are. This is emotional strength. Quiet, steady, built in the moments no one sees. Because no one applauds when you pause instead of snapping. No one throws you a parade for staying silent when you could have erupted. But those are the reps that count. Those are the moments that build the emotional capacity you need to carry everything else. So train with your triggers. Life isn't punishing you, it's shaping you. Most people believe in speaking their truth. We're told not to bottle things up, not to let people walk over us. Express how you feel, they say, don't let it fester.
And yes, there's truth in that.
But not the whole truth, because there's another kind of expression that doesn't liberate you. It leaks from you. It's not healing, it's harm disguised as honesty. That's what happens when you speak from the wound, not the wisdom from the ache, not the understanding. There's a time to speak. But there's also a time to wait, not forever, just long enough to let the sting pass, to let the noise settle, to let the message you're carrying find clarity instead of chaos. Because what we say in pain often sounds nothing like what we mean in peace. Carl Jung said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people, but you can't know your own darkness while it's still flaring, while it's still hot, while your nervous system is flooded. And your ego is screaming for validation, for defense, for revenge. In that state, you're not speaking from your true self. You're speaking from your wound. And wounds don't have good language. They have survival reflexes. They blame, they exaggerate. They speak in ultimatums. They say things that can't be unsaid. That's why silence at the right time isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's restraint. It's what protects you from saying something that might feel good for a second, but damage everything you've built for years. That pause, that moment where you want to say everything but choose not to, is where your real strength is tested. Because it's not hard to speak. When emotions are high, it's hard to wait to feel everything and still say nothing, to sit with the pain, not project it, to let your inner storm pass before bringing anyone else into it. Socrates once said, the greatest way to live to honor in this world is to actually be what we pretend to be, and many people pretend to be strong by speaking first, by getting the last word, by unloading what they feel without considering the cost. But true strength looks like this. I'm in pain, and I still choose not to hurt you with it. I'm angry, but I won't let that be the only voice in the room. I'm triggered, but I won't turn that into a weapon. That kind of silence is sacred. It gives you space to find your truth, not the one distorted by emotion, but the one anchored in self-awareness, the one that holds accountability, not just accusation, the one that honors both you and the relationship you're speaking into, because once you've healed, or at least begun to, your words soften, they stop sounding like explosions and start sounding like insight. You're not just trying to prove a point or punish someone anymore. You're trying to connect. You're trying to build something stronger than your pain. And ironically, once you've done that inner work, you often find you don't need to say half of what you thought you did. The emotional charge is gone. The need to defend disappears, the urgency fades. What remains is calm, grounded clarity. And from that place, you can speak with power that doesn't wound. You can express yourself without spilling.
Unprocessed.
Ocean, on someone who might not deserve it. Aristotle said anybody can become angry, that is easy, but to be angry with the right person to the right degree at the right time. And in the right way. That is not easy, The same is true for all strong emotion. The words you speak in your most triggered state aren't wise, they're just loud. And loud doesn't equal true. Loud equals wounded.
So,
How do you know? If you're speaking too soon, if you still feel the urge to win, you're not ready. If you're still crafting sentences in your head designed to sting. Or shame, you're not ready. If you feel that familiar tightness in your throat, that quickened breath, that racing mind, you're not ready. Wait, not forever. Just until your clarity returns. Just until you can separate your truth from your pain.
Just until you can speak without needing to dominate hurt.
Or be right, because when you speak after you've healed, you say fewer words and they land deeper. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to rehash the entire story. You just name what's real, what matters, what you've learned. And people feel the difference. They're more open, less defensive, more willing to hear you because you're not throwing your pain at them. You're offering understanding, and even if they don't understand, even if the words fall on deaf ears, you can walk away knowing you spoke from your highest self, not your hurt self. And that alone is worth more than any temporary satisfaction that comes from getting it all out. Let the wound speak to you first. Let it tell you what still hurts. Let it show you where you still need softness, compassion, boundaries tend to that then speak. Speak from the scar, not the cut. Speak from the lesson, not the chaos.
Speak with love for yourself, not as a weapon against someone else.
Because silence used wisely is not silence at all. It's strength. It's choosing to protect your peace, your dignity, and your future, even when the present feels heavy. And that's a power no outburst can ever match. Most people don't feel emotions. They become them. One moment, they're calm. The next, they're furious. One small comment, one unexpected delay. And suddenly, they're not thinking clearly anymore. They're gripped by anger, flooded with fear, drowning in shame. The emotion becomes the lens. It distorts everything. And they forget the most important truth in that moment. You are not the emotion. You're the one watching it. That difference between being the feeling and observing it is the line between chaos and clarity, between being dragged around by every thought and standing still in the middle of the storm. Carl Jung said, until you ache the unconscious, conscious it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. Emotions are part of that unconscious current. They rise without warning, surge through your system, and unless you've practiced awareness, they use you. You become their puppet, your voice, your posture, your choices, driven not by wisdom but by whatever raw feeling took over your system. But feelings aren't facts. They're visitors. They show up, they speak, they leave. And if you can learn to pause, even for a breath, you create space between you and the feeling in that space. You reclaim your role. You remember, you are not anger. You are not fear. You are not the ego screaming to defend itself. You are the observer, the one behind the thoughts, the one who can choose not to react. Socrates said, know thyself. But how can you know yourself if you're constantly merged with whatever mood is present? Self-knowledge begins with separation, with stepping back, not to disconnect, but to see, to notice the story your emotion is telling without blindly believing it. Say anger rises. It feels urgent. It tells you someone crossed a line. It demands action now. But if you wait just a few seconds, if you don't move, don't speak, don't lash out, you begin to notice the anger isn't you. It's just energy, a defense mechanism, a flare from some part of you. It felt threatened, and when you don't obey it, immediately it loses power. You feel it, but it doesn't control. Your fear works the same way. It creeps in with whispers of what might go wrong. It tightens your chest, speeds up, your breath fills your head with disaster. But even fear, when observed, weakens the act of naming it. There's fear pulls you into presence. You become the watcher, and the watcher is always calm. Because the watcher knows no emotion lasts, that all feelings like clouds pass through the sky of your awareness, and you're not the cloud, you're the sky.
Aristotle said anyone can become angry. That is easy.
But to be angry with the right person to the right degree at the right time, that is not easy. What makes it possible is disidentification. That's the superpower, to be able to say, I feel anger rising, but I am not. That anger, that shift gives you choice, and choice is what transforms reaction into response. You stop being pulled around like a puppet. You start guiding your behavior with intention. This doesn't mean you suppress how you feel. You don't deny the emotion, you welcome it. You feel it deeply. But you don't become it. You don't build your identity on it. You let it flow through, not root in. Think of it like a fire alarm going off. The emotion is the alarm, loud, urgent, impossible to ignore, but you don't grab a hammer and start smashing things. You investigate. You look for the source. Is there a real fire or just some smoke? That's how you begin treating emotions with curiosity instead of compliance. Every time you choose to observe instead of react, you get stronger, more centered, more free. You stop walking through life as a slave to your moods. You become consistent, steady people. Feel the difference in your energy. You're not so easily rattled, not so easily provoked, not because you don't feel, but because you don't let feelings define you. Plato wrote, "The first and best victory is to conquer self, and you conquer self not by force, but by awareness, by noticing the exact moment when emotion wants to take the wheel, and calmly, quietly choosing to keep your hands on it. Instead, this isn't easy work. It takes practice, patience, discipline. But with each moment of disidentification, you get closer to emotional sovereignty, the state where you no longer need the world to be perfect for you to be okay. Because now your peace doesn't depend on external harmony. It depends on inner separation between you and the storm. You are not the anger. You are not the fear. You are not the ego shouting for control. You are the one watching it all unfold with quiet power and the ability to decide what comes next. The world won't go quiet just because you found your peace. People will still cut you off mid-sentence. They'll still talk behind your back, misread your intentions, fail to apologize. Choose ego over honesty. Life will still throw things you didn't plan for: late nights, early calls, broken trust, sudden losses. The noise won't stop. The chaos won't dissolve, but if you've mastered what we've been building toward, you won't shake. Because the point was never to change the world. The point was to change how you move through it. Most people live in a constant state of emotional turbulence, bouncing between triggers like a pinball. They believe they need the world to be different, kinder, quieter, more predictable for them to feel okay. So they try to manage everything outside themselves, clinging to people who agree, avoiding situations that might sting, chasing control, like it's the only way to stay afloat. But what if you didn't need to control the waves? What if you just learned how to stand still inside them? Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And in this final frame, you become untouchable, not because nothing touches you, but because it no longer owns you. You don't become the noise. You don't match every mood in the room. You don't swing wildly from high to low out based on someone else's words. You stay centered, quiet inside. That's the power of all the inner work of watching, detaching, disidentifying. You begin to live not as a reactor, but as a responder. And the difference is, everything reacting is fast, defensive, emotional. It's driven by fear or pride or unexamined pain. Responding is slow, deliberate, conscious. It comes from presence, not panic. And once you live from response, the world starts to look different. Not because it changed, but because you did. The same insult that used to burn now sounds like static. The same rejection that once collapsed you now feels like redirection. You lose the urge to prove yourself. You no longer need to win arguments or control outcomes. You don't need the apology to find closure. You don't need everyone to understand. That's emotional freedom. Socrates said, to find yourself, think for yourself, and to think for yourself, you first have to see yourself separate from the waves of emotion, the noise of ego, the storms that others live inside. Because when you know who you are, no one else can tell you who you're not. And here's the part no one tells you. When you master this, you still feel you're not a robot. You're not numb. You still notice the betrayal, the sarcasm, the loss. You still care. But the difference is you don't react. From the wound you respond, from the wisdom that was forged through it. That quiet confidence shows up in how you breathe when everyone else is yelling, in how you choose silence over proving your point, and how you walk away, not out of weakness, but because you're no longer trying to convince someone of your worth. Plato wrote, "The measure of a person is what they do with power, and the greatest power isn't dominance or control. It's restraint, it's discipline, it's the ability to stay aligned. When everything around you is pulling at your edges, you don't chase closure. You don't repeat stories that drain you. You don't sit in rooms where your peace has to shrink. You walk forward with less noise, more clarity. This is the final frame, where the world still roars, but your soul stays silent, not because you're avoiding life, but because you've learned how to meet it with awareness, with steadiness, with the kind of inner strength that can't be faked and doesn't need to be announced. You're not triggered, you're trained, you're not reactive. You're responsible for your energy, your choices, your presence, and the world notices not. Because you're louder, but because you carry something rare, a stillness. No insult can shatter a calm that doesn't rely on comfort, a clarity that came not from escaping chaos, but from walking straight through it and coming out unshaken when the world pulls at your edges. Remember, your strength is not in how loudly you react, but in how quietly you remain centered. Let them shout. Let life twist. You are not here to match the storm. You are here to master your calm. Watch the next video on your screen to keep sharpening your mind and steadying your spirit. Thank you for walking this path with us. You are part of Stoic Journal, where every step inward leads you forward. And when you're ready, come back. We'll be right here, building the silence that holds real power.